Good morning, everybody. My name is Brad. I'm one of the pastors here. And welcome to second weekend of Advent. The theme that we're looking at Christmas through this year, the lens, is hope. Hope is a big deal at Christmas time. I mean, it is all the time, right? But somehow this spotlight, this culmination of millennia of patient waiting, hope-filled waiting, and faith-filled preparation culminate at Christmas time when God comes into our world and becomes one of us. And, if all he had done is just shown us by his character and his nature what life with God really looks like, that would have been enough. But he comes, shows us that, and then gives his life so we can actually live that way. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And I hope that you have hope in your own life, that is like a reality for you. And there's this quiet, patient, hopeful expectation, and then preparation for what it looks like to live that life with Jesus. So we've been thinking about hope. And last weekend, I'm so grateful Gavin was here. He's a guy that planted a church 6 years ago in Old Town Peoria, and he talked about hope. He kicked us off with this really encouraging idea that when hope is essential when things are tough, right? But oftentimes when things are difficult for us, and you name what the difficulties are, without hope, we try to find a way around our difficulty. We try to avoid it, we try to deny it, but in the end, we can't really do that. And hope says, God, I have hope in you, I'm going through it. I'm going through it with you. I might stumble through it. It might be a challenge to go through it, but I'm going through it with you because my hope is you're going to get me to the other side. And that's the nature of hope. Well, this morning, I want to look at hope once again through a particular type of difficulty that we all face in one way or another. And the truth is we're either just coming out of this, we're in it, or we're going to go through it. And that has to do with our healing, our bodies, the health of our minds, the health of our emotions, the health of who we are as a human being. And so I want to start with where I'm ending to prepare you for that. One of the wonderful things of the earliest days of the church that we read is that the church prayed for each other. They gathered together and they prayed for one another. So at the end of our gathering, I'll talk a little bit about hope for healing. I'm going to invite you, if you are in a place where you would say, Jesus, I'm wondering whether you would use this season to heal me. And it might be something physical. It might be maybe just chronically just depressed and sad about the things that have happened in your world. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe it's a relationship that you would just ask him to heal and restore and bring hope into that. So at the end, if you want to, we'll gather here and I'll tell you a little bit more about some pieces of fabric that are really prayer shawls. I'll explain that a little bit, but these are things that you can use as symbols of God's embracing love and take to someone and pray with them. They may not be here today. So, but let's start with this. I want to start by talking a little bit about the varying ideas that we run into, how Jesus heals or what prompts him to heal or does he still heal? And there's a lot of confusion over that because you have so many different kind of theological ideas and views of this. I know that there's some that have a theological view that all sickness is some kind of curse or work of the enemy of Satan and his henchmen. And what you need to do is you need to take authority over those things because Jesus came and he gave his life as a gift and an act to defeat Satan. And so you just need to take authority over those things. I have a friend who would come from a faith tradition where he would say, miracles and healings and these kind of personal interventions from Jesus, they just don't happen any longer. They kind of faded away when Jesus and his first followers called apostles died, and that just kind of ended it all. And now healing comes through medical science or through other ways. It's still God's involved, but those miracles of healing don't happen any longer. Similarly, some would say that they're sure that God heals only through medical science. And to pray for unexplainable healings is just for kind of the weak-minded. And that's their view. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, there are faith groups that refuse medical treatment. And they believe this is entirely in God's hands, and they wouldn't want to help him out in any way. My own tradition, and this may be many of you, was this: I was taught that if you just have enough faith, Jesus will heal, he'll do anything. And then Jesus doesn't do something. And I remember from a little boy on going, well, that's my fault. Because he can do it, I guess I just don't have enough faith. And so the reason friend or family or my grandmother would pass away, because I didn't have enough faith. And it just leaves you kind of in shambles, and you feel ashamed and you feel guilty over it. And I know that can't be right, but it's that kind of thought. So at some point with all those ideas and those thoughts, is there some way to bring some simplicity to this? To kind of clear out that confusion and those conflicting ideas and just simplify the thing a little bit. So I may oversimplify it today, forgive me if I do, but what I would love to do is just kind of strip some of that stuff away and just go to the basic idea of, Jesus, if we were to ask you to heal, would you do that? And see what he does. So let's take a little bit of a journey here. Here's where I want to start. Our bodies have a propensity to break down, don't they? Yeah. Isn't it interesting, on a week where I would choose to speak about healing, I get the second cold in 3 weeks. What is that? That's injustice is what that is. Yeah. So here's what happened. From the very earliest days when Adam and Eve made their fateful decision to live independent of God, there is this cataclysmic catastrophe that happens. A shock wave goes through creation, and it's never been the same since that point. When they made their choice, and let's not be too hard on them, because all of us in subsequent generations have also chosen to live independent of God. And if nobody had up till the point where we did, the same cataclysmic shock wave would have gone through creation, because suddenly it became something that it was not made to be. And our bodies that were made to live forever began to break down, and every single one of us would ultimately not survive. Were you aware that the death rate hovers right around 100%? Did you know that? Sure, we do. We know that. But we still want to be whole and healthy. Even if we know that. Even if we know that sickness is a part of life and death is a part of life, who doesn't want to be whole and be healthy? And if you're whole and healthy, you're going to want to live. This is us as human beings. We see this reality portrayed not even just in Scripture. We could look at it there, and we will, but we see it in just for example, the way we pick our superheroes, right? Did you know that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of superheroes that we create? They're not actually real, right? We're on that same page, right? We've created them. Do you know that there are over 100 superheroes that we have given the superpower ability to heal themselves or others? What does that tell you? We long for a superhero who can heal us. We really do. I grew up with this guy, Superman. Dude, if he got injured, he was almost impervious, but if he did get injured, you know how he got healed? Sun rays. The radiation from the sun would heal this guy. It was amazing. I was so impressed with that. It was a really cool thing. I remember, I think it was in Batman, The Dark Knight Returns. Megan, am I right? Probably. Superman heals his body after being reduced to a near skeletal fragment of his original self by a nuclear blast of some kind or another, and he stands in the sun, he gets healed. It's amazing. Here's another one, the Flash. We created him. And you can go really fast if you're the Flash, right? You know what else you can do? Heal really fast. And that was his deal. He was just super fast, and he could heal super fast, and he actually, in certain episodes, he could even heal others around him. Wolverine, another guy, not just known for his claws or his, whatever those things were that came out of his wrists, right? He had this mutant ability to heal himself and other people. Another guy I grew up on, he was not as big as he is lately, the Hulk, really green, but really powerful, and he had the ability to heal himself in a shorter time span than anybody else in Marvel's universe. And here's one, Deadpool. Yeah, you just couldn't get rid of this guy. I can't shake this image from my mind of him sitting on the couch, full-bodied man with little baby boy legs. And then he just had to wait for them to grow. It was a stupid idea. But we created it because there's a longing that someone would come and heal the brokenness that we experience. Then who can forget, this is a contemporary, who can forget this guy? Mayhem. The Allstate guy that just won't go away. The guy gets into a terrible accident, right? He's all like wrecked and everything. Comes back half an hour later for another 30-second commercial, and he's all fixed, and now his next mayhem. He's just impervious. But that's not just like recent. If you go back 1,000 years, an author created Merlin the magician. This is a picture, a rendering of him. And he had this ability through a supernatural spring and water that came from it that healed him, and then he could give that to other people, and he would heal people. 1,000 years ago, we were dreaming of a superhero that would bring healing and wholeness to us. Go back a couple of thousand years. Here's a contemporary of Jesus' day. Asclepius. Heard of him? Here's a statue of him. He was the Greco-Roman god of medicine and healing. And people worshiped him and believed that he had the power because he was one of the divinities that could heal supernaturally and wonderfully. And sick people would go to a statue, to a place where his image was. And they would offer him sacrifices, fruit and vegetables and so on, believing, hoping that he would bring healing to their lives. Well, with this pantheon of healers, it's true that we really do want to be well. We are hopelessly hopers when it comes to our healing. And you know something? We were designed by God to be whole, to be healthy and to be well. We were designed to live forever. Sickness and death were not his idea. They were not his idea. And so for us, it should come as no surprise that when he enters into our world and becomes a human being, he brings with it a longing to bring redemption to our bodies, to our minds, our emotions, and our souls. It comes as no surprise that he's this redeeming God that sees what he's made beautifully and perfectly and sees what it's designed and destined to be, sees what sin and living independent of him have done, and he says, I'm not okay with that. I'm going to bring healing to their souls, but I'm also going to bring healing to their bodies. So let's take a minute or two, go through like a bit of a scriptural safari of some of the places where Jesus heals in marvelous and wonderful ways. And my hope would be that our hope would go up. And we would go, well, maybe Jesus, maybe you would heal me. I might have asked many times. Others might have asked for me. But my hope is strong enough today that I'm going to ask one more time. I'm going to see what you do. So here's one, Matthew 15. Jesus returned to the Sea of Galilee, and he climbed a hill and he sat down. A vast crowd brought to him people who were lame, blind, crippled, those who couldn't speak, and many others, you name it. They were there. They laid them before Jesus. Why? Because they hoped that Jesus could heal them. And what does he do? Get this, underline this. He healed them all. He healed them all. I read one commentator, I don't know if this is true or not. I read one commentator this last week. It said, I think for 3 years, there wasn't a disease in all of Israel. Because the healer, the creator, was on the ground, healing people. Another one, Matthew 9. Jesus has just explained why he's doing something new on earth. And it says, as Jesus was saying this, the leader of a synagogue came and knelt before him. Why? Because he hoped that something would happen for him. This is what he was struggling with. He says, my daughter has just died. But Jesus, you can bring her back to life again if you just come and lay your hand on her. You got to stop and feel that one. This last week, we've been following 3 young children who lost their lives in Tonto Creek, right? One of those young children attends West Wing School, and on Wednesday we had a gathering of 100 or so people here just to pray for the family and the grief and the sadness. That's a real thing, and this synagogue leader is experiencing that. Can you see why he would run to Jesus? There's just a morsel of hope, maybe. This is a big deal for him. So it says Jesus and his disciples, it must have stirred them. They got up and they went with them. Of course they did. And now here's one of these cool things. When Matthew tells a story, sometimes he tells a story within a story. So now he shifts a little bit. In verse 20, he says, just then a woman who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding came up behind him. Hopelessly hopers, right? Maybe, just maybe, 12 years. She maybe had gone to the temple over and over again, but now Jesus is on the ground in her presence, and she's maybe thinking, well, maybe, just maybe he'll be willing. I'm going to go see. And so she touched the fringe of his robe. If I can just touch his robe, I hope I'll be healed. I hope so. I really do. Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be encouraged. Your faith, your hope became faith, and faith has made you well. And the woman was healed in that moment. And was her Christmas different or what? Then back to the story. Matthew takes us here. When Jesus arrived at the official's home, so they've left for the synagogue leader's home, and he saw the noisy crowd and he heard the funeral music. He says, get out. Not like get out, but get out. Because something's about to happen here. The girl isn't dead. She is only asleep. But of course, the crowd didn't have the hope that the synagogue leader had, so what did they do? Well, they laughed at him. After the crowd was put outside, however, Jesus went in, and get this, what a day it was for this family, and took the girl by the hand, and she stood up. And of course, the report of this miracle swept through the entire countryside. Now we're back on the hope train, right? One last one, Matthew 20. As Jesus and his disciples left the town of Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting beside the road. When they heard that Jesus was coming that way, they began shouting, Lord, Lord, Son of David, would you have mercy on us? Because we're hoping, just hoping, you might heal us. Oh, be quiet, the crowd yelled at them. But they only shouted louder. These are determined people. Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when Jesus heard them, he stopped and he called. This is a great line. Don't you want him to turn to you and ask you this? What do you want me to do for you? Because when Jesus asks that, it's not like someone who can't do it is asking. He can do it. And he's the one that's asking. In other words, what are you guys hoping for? And what were they hoping for? Of course they were, Lord, we want to see. That's what we want. And it says Jesus felt sorry, he felt pity, or a better word, empathy. He engaged in their world and he felt their hope and he touched their eyes and instantly they could see. And they did the only logical thing. They followed him. And story after story, Lazarus, his good friend, he delays going to heal him, though he could do it. And Lazarus dies and he comes back to life again. People who have leprosy, sometimes 10 at a time. People who are paralyzed, described as invalids, deformed hands, completely restored, deaf, mute, blind people, and on it goes. You could clearly come to the conclusion that Jesus wants to heal every disease and every illness, right? Would that be a fair and logical conclusion based on those stories? And here's the thing, he does. Just some of us are not going to experience that here, but we're all going to experience it because he is intent on redeeming that which has been taken by illness and disease and addiction and so on. And then wouldn't it be wonderful just to end right there and go, well, now I'm filled with hope. I can do this. I can make a step of faith here. Yeah, and then you run headlong into the story I want to read you. It's a story about if we used our equation that we often use, if there was ever somebody who deserved to be healed, it's this guy. Now, if that's really a thing, if dedication and faithfulness and humility and perseverance and faith are the criteria for getting a healing yes from Jesus, this first century hero was spades on that one. Should have been a no-brainer, no question, you got it. His name is Paul. And he's this amazing inspiration for every Jesus follower. But apparently along the way, in spite of who he is and what he is doing for Jesus, he gets sick with some kind of chronic illness that negatively affects what he's doing for Jesus. And there's all kinds of speculation of what it is. A lot of Scholars, theologians think that if you recall, Paul has this amazing conversion experience from anti-Jesus to full pro-Jesus, but it all centers around a blazing white light that he sees. So a lot of people have speculated, well, probably what it was, there was something that remained in his eyes from that, some damage that possibly was done, maybe a way just to remind him of what has happened. And so there's speculation that it was cataracts or glaucoma or, something like that. Others have said, no, it's not that. It's epilepsy or malarial fever is another idea that's out there. Some other physical impediment. Some even have said that there was something physically repulsive, some disfigurement about Paul that was what he calls the thorn in his flesh. It matters not what it is. What matters is the hope that he has that Jesus would fix it and Jesus would heal him. Something that Jesus had done for so many others. It's reasonable to expect, because of the criteria we often apply to the rationale of why Jesus heals, a really good guy doing really great things for Jesus. Surely he's going to be healed. And so Paul does what we would do. In 2 Corinthians 12, we're told 3 times, I begged the Lord, I begged him to take it away. And each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. 3 times at least, Paul goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, I am begging you. This is affecting me. It's hindering what I have on my heart to do for you. It creates pain, it creates discomfort, it sidetracks me, whatever it is. Jesus, I've seen you heal people. And my hope is that you would do this for me. I am so desperate, at least on 3 occasions where he begs Jesus to heal him. And what he gets back is, no, not yet, not now, maybe not till heaven. But what I will give you is I'm going to give you grace, and I'm going to turn that weakness into something that's strong. What a downer. No, really. Can you join him in that? Wouldn't you be disappointed? What's he praying for? He's not praying for God's grace to see him through it. He's not praying that it would be turned into some strength. He's asking for it to be healed. And what he gets back is, I'm going to do something different. How discouraging, how disappointing would that be? And some of us have experienced that. See, Jesus, you're supposed to fix this. You're supposed to heal it. I know that you can. I've seen you do it before. But this whole grace and strength through weakness, that's a consolation prize. That's not what I want. And I'm not going to accept it. In fact, the truth is, this is going to affect our relationship, Jesus. Once I bounce back, back on my feet again, and I'm restored, evidently, kind of just what happens because you're not going to help me with that. It's going to affect my level of trust with you, Jesus. I just want you to know that. Isn't that how you and I would respond? Maybe I'm alone in that, but I've asked Jesus for things sometimes. And I think he said no. And my response has not been admirable. It's not. Here's the interesting thing for me. If you read a little bit of Paul's life, like in Acts 19, okay? Can I read you a little something here? I'm going to anyways, if I can or can't. Acts 19, it's not going to come up on the screen. God gave Paul the power to perform unusual miracles. When handkerchiefs or aprons that had merely touched his skin were placed on sick people, they were healed of all their diseases. Physician, heal thyself. But those handkerchiefs apparently, when they touched Paul, had no effect. He is used to heal people, but he gets back from Jesus, Paul. It's going to be grace and continued weakness. I'm going to turn it to strength. So how does Paul really respond to that? We might respond the way I suggested, or I would, but this is how Paul responds. To buckle up. This seems so unrealistic. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses, he says, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults and hardships and persecutions and troubles that have come with it. And I suffer for Jesus. That's just part of the deal. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Probably just trying to inspire us, right? Because that's a good, godly, good boy kind of response. I don't think so. I think what he's saying is, would I want Jesus to heal me? Yeah. Do I keep hoping that Jesus will? You bet. I hope that as much as I've ever hoped. It's not diminished. It's not been reduced. I deal with this weakness all the time. But I have discovered that the longer I walk with Jesus, that I got so much more than no, not now, not yet, not till heaven. I really got in the middle of that something I would have missed if I hadn't had that, and that is his amazing strength and grace. And he has taken this weakness, this limp, this thing, and I cannot believe what he has done through it. There's stuff that would have never happened. There are people who have seen what he can do through a deformed or sick or limping or injured or chronically ill person. And the trust and the faith that I've had in him through all of that, without complaint. I didn't fake it. I didn't try to go around it. I went through it, and I found his grace, and I found he could do great things through me. Like that is graduate level. And I am not there. Are you? I guess you all are. Well, that's wonderful. Paul gets to the point where he says, I actually would prefer this. So what is that? Is that hope or is that faith, or are those the same thing? Well, hope and faith are not the same thing. Here's the deal. Remember this. Hope leads to faith. Lots of hope in the short term does often not lead to lots of faith. Lots of hope sometimes leads to a little bit of faith. And then you continue in hope and faith grows. And it becomes more and more and more than what it ever could be. So I said I wanted to simplify it. You know, the Bible simplifies this for us, like hope and faith and what that is. This is what we read in Hebrews 11. Whoever wrote this, really, really wise person, maybe it was Paul, maybe not, but this is what we read in the first verse of Hebrews 11. Now faith, I'm going to define faith, is being sure of what we hope for. In other words, you have to hope first before faith comes. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain for what we do not see. I'm going to leave that on the screen for just a little bit. Let me give you a way oversimplified illustration. And if this is like too simplified, forgive me. Imagine that I invite you for lunch. We meet out in the plaza here this morning, and we've never met before, and we strike up a conversation, and it's just some commonalities that we experience together. And I thought, boy, I'd really like to take a little more time and sit down, hear your story, discover a little more about you. So I'm going to invite you for lunch. So I call you up, or I text you and go, hey, would you be willing to meet me for lunch on Wednesday of next week? I hope you'll do that. I've extended the invitation, and I hope to meet you for lunch. What would have to happen to turn that hope that I meet you for lunch into, I know I'm meeting you for lunch? What would have to happen? What would have to be part of this equation so that I'm sure and I'm certain where hope turns to faith? Well, pause that for just a little bit. There's a clue to this, what that missing piece might be that would turn hope to faith in the rest of Hebrews 11. And I encourage you, read Hebrews 11. It is like a fantastic chapter of this idea being repeated over and over again. Hope that leads to faith. Let me take you to verse 5 and 6. Introduce you to a guy by the name of Enoch. It was by faith that Enoch was taken up to heaven without dying. How would that be? There's only one other person that experienced that. He disappeared because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. Another verse I want to mention, a couple of verses aren't going to come up on the screen, but from Genesis 5, it's where we're really introduced to him. This is what it says. Enoch walked faithfully with God for 300 years. They lived a little longer, apparently, then. He had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more. Poof. Because God took him away. So something happened when this guy is 65 years old. He discovers God in some new way. And for the next 300 years, he's not just like a God person. He's a follower of God. For 300 years, he's with God. He's doing life with God. He's enjoying God. What do you learn about God over 300 years? A lot. And you discover a consistency in his character, a predictability about him. You know what he's going to do. You know how he's going to respond. It might take 300 years to be confident in that. And you and I aren't going to get the 300 years here probably. But we're going to get a week or two or a month or weeks or years or 40 or 50 years. And you do life with God, you're going to learn some things about him. You're going to discover that he's consistent, that he's truthful, he tells the truth all the time, he's present all the time, he loves all the time, he's right all the time, he's merciful all the time, he forgives all the time. You live with him long enough, you go, you are so predictable, God, so predictable, that even when you would say no to some specific request, I've walked with you enough, I know who you are by character, and you don't have to say yes to me because I know your character. You know what the bridge between hope and faith is? It's the character of the person you're hoping for. And when that person shows their character and their faithfulness and their take and their love and their mercy, guess what grows? Faith grows. Certainty grows. Predictability grows. Confidence grows. So what's the gap that would make me absolutely certain you're going to show up? Like responding to my voicemail would be helpful to say you're going to be there, but that's not even a sure thing because if you're not a truth teller, you can say all you want. It's when I show up and you're already there, or I get there and a few minutes later you show up for the very first time, I go, okay, now we're building a little bit of trust here. And let's say we do this for 3 months. Every week we get together for lunch. After 3 months, you call me the night before one time and you go, hey, something's come up, I can't make it. And the first thing I think is you're having lunch with someone else. No, I don't. First thing I think is, well, something really came up, which I wouldn't have thought if you didn't show up for the first one. Now go another year with it. I promise you this, you don't even have to call me. If you don't come, you know what the first thing I'm going to think is? I'm going to think I'm concerned that you're okay. I'm not going to question your character. I'm not going to wonder about you. But that takes time. Do you know that you will not put faith in someone you do not know? And hope turns to faith when you know the one you're putting hope in. And this is what we're intended to do. So we get to ask Jesus, who we have put our hope in. And the more we know him, the more confident we are that even if he says, no, not yet, not now, maybe not till heaven, we can still ask him with confidence. Because what we're sure of is not that he'll say yes, but his grace will be there. His presence will be there. He's right. He's good. He's merciful and good all the time. That's what we know. There's a wonderful story. I'm going to finish with this. In Luke chapter 5, it's a story that every time I read it, it creates a kind of an emotional experience in me. It's another healing story. In Luke 5, we read, in one of the villages, Jesus met a man with an advanced case of leprosy. You know, leprosy is kind of this kind of neurological condition where you lose feeling in your limbs, in your feet and your hands. And that's not what will get you. What will get you is you don't realize when you've stubbed your toe that is actually a broken toe that actually gets infected because you can't feel. Or your hands get infected because you don't have that pain sensation. And that's ultimately what would take your life. Well, this guy has an advanced case of leprosy. He might have already lost some limbs. Who knows? We don't know. But when he saw Jesus, he is hopeful. He is filled with hope. And so he bows his face to the ground. What? Begging to be healed, because that's what he wanted. Of course he did. It's like he says, Jesus, I am hopeful. I'm filled with hope that you can do this. Watch what he says. And this is the part that grips me. He says, Lord, if you're willing, you can heal me and make me clean. I am not coming to you demanding you do it. I'm not reminding you did it for someone else. I'm not telling you I'll be profoundly disappointed. This is your only shot, Jesus, to do this. I love the humility of this guy. He knows he maybe had a lunch with Jesus. He knows just enough of Jesus' character to say, I know you can, but you might not be willing, and I'm okay. Because you're still good. I'm still your son. I'm still loved by you. You're still great, and you're still merciful. And what's Jesus' response to it? He says, I am willing. I am. Be healed. And instantly, the leprosy disappeared. Hope that becomes faith. So this morning, my guess is that we're all not well in some way or another. My guess is that some of us, just like last night, have asked Jesus repeatedly to bring healing for an addiction that's wrecked so much in your world. Healing for a diagnosis that you got that scares the life out of you. Depression and discouragement that have haunted you for so long. What are the chances that Jesus might be willing today to heal you? I know hope is maybe strong or different places of strength, but hope can become faith as we trust the character of our Savior. So I want to invite you. Band's going to come. Megan, why don't you come with the band? We're going to play a song. And you can stay right where you are too. That's okay. But sometimes the first step of faith that's driven and fueled by hope is to actually get up from where we sit and to come. And somebody's going to meet you if you do. And we're not going to coach you. We're not going to ask for your medical history. We're going to pray for you. We're simply going to ask, Jesus, if you're willing, you can do this. But we come humbly and ask, would you be willing in this moment to do that? I mentioned these tables with what are prayer shawls. We have given away so many of these, and the idea with them is that there's somebody in your world, in your life, a friend, a family member, that they're not here with you today, but you would love to pray with them, and you'd love to ask that same thing of Jesus, that he would heal them. Why don't you come and take one of these prayer shawls and take it to them, put it on them, wrap it around them, remind them that it's a symbol of the arms of Jesus and that he's a healing God. And then you ask him, Jesus, would you be willing to heal my friend or my family member? And just see what he does. See what he might do. If you take one of these, we would ask that you would fill out a card on the table right over here. You see, we want to pray for you and your friend or family member as well. We want to follow up and want to hear the wonderful story of healing or God's grace or his strength that he brings in the middle of that weakness. So I want to pray, and then I invite you to come. Jesus, you want to redeem this world, the whole world, and one day you're going to do that completely. But right now, it's not quite there. And some of us are just struggling with ill health and with discouragement or addictions. And yet we have hope that you could do something for us, that you would do this maybe. And so we're going to come and ask you together, just like the earliest days of the church did, just together prayed for one another and see what you might do, see if you might be willing. So Jesus, would you hear these heartfelt, begging, pleading cries for healing? And in the end, Jesus, just let you know, we'll leave the results in your hands.